Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot of information to cover. So please, I hope you have something to write on and something to write with, because we want to make sure that this information is retained. My name is Tony Martinez, and I will be presenting the event today, or the training, I should say. But before we get too far into the process, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that me, as a presenter, I'm neither an attorney nor a tax professional. I am not dispensing any type of legal advice or financial advice. We always encourage all of you to seek out attorneys for legal and tax professionals and financial professionals when it comes to the financial aspect of any decision. A little bit about my background and what qualifies me to be in a position to share this information with you. I've been doing this a long time. I am an active real estate broker associate in the state of Florida. Today's session is all about how to possibly stop the foreclosure process in Florida. Some of these things apply to other states as well, but we're going into specificity on Florida. So if you're watching this from another state, it may not have the same value to you. But I am the co-team leader of Xtreme by LPT Realty. I am the founder of the Florida Foreclosure Prevention Network, and we're non-governmental. We're just an affiliation, association of like-minded individuals, professionals that have a passion to help people that are going through a crisis right now involving their mortgage payments, or I should say their mortgages, and what we can do to possibly assist them. Now, I teach for a living. I wear several different hats, but I have been training real estate professionals now for more years than I can count on how to help distressed homeowners, maybe like yourselves, on what to do when they're facing a foreclosure. You may have been invited to view this video by one of my CDPEs, or at least by someone that has a desire to make sure that you know what options are available to you. And if you need a specific number of agents that I have trained, I think that number is at least 25,000. I mean, almost every single day, I'm doing some form of training and helping people with this type of situation. One of the things that I want to go ahead and convey is that you are absolutely not alone. Foreclosures are increasing at an alarming rate. Florida, as of the time that I recorded this, was third in the nation in foreclosure activity. We're always in the top five, definitely in the top 10, but Florida in particular is experiencing a lot of foreclosure activity. So please, I know it could feel like the whole weight of the world is on your shoulders and you're alone, but you're not. And look, I'm speaking from experience. I'm not afraid to go ahead and share that during the 2008 crisis, the great financial crisis, I experienced foreclosure firsthand. So I know the different emotions that various people will go through, everything from anger, fear, denial, apathy, all of these things, wanting revenge. Maybe you're angry at the bank and all these kind of things. And what I try to do is say, folks, I get it. I've been there, but you have to try to put those emotions aside right now and start making rational, good choices for you and your family. So maybe this gives you comfort, maybe it doesn't, but we're going to see a lot more foreclosures in the years to come in the great state of Florida. Now, as I say this, foreclosure is not necessarily the only option. See, what typically happens is when someone is facing this crisis, it is very common for someone to shut down. Maybe you've done this, right? You kind of put your head in the sand and you're hoping and praying that the problem goes away. And here's the thing, it's not going to go away. You need to take some steps. And what I try to do, what I train agents every single day on is try to engage with folks that are going through this and see if they understand what their options are, if they know what their rights are, and see if you can help them, guide them to possibly be able to stay in the home. That is our mission, to try to help you stay in your home. What if that's not viable? What if that's not even possible? Then about the only thing that I could ever recommend that you do is to exit with dignity. So we're going to go through different steps. I'm going to cover a lot of information today. I'm going to try to do it in such a way so that this video is not an hour long, but I do want to give you that information and you'll be able to play this over and over again. But let's just say foreclosure is not the only option. The process is exactly that. It is a process. Oftentimes people think that foreclosure, you get served, you lose the house, you're gone, it's done. Not the case at all. It is an actual process. So I'm going to walk you through the foreclosure process as it pertains to Florida. Not a single event. It is a process that can take several months. One of the advantages that we have in Florida is that we are a judicial state. Being a judicial state means that all foreclosures have to go through the court system. That means we typically will have more time. Sadly, a lot of the time is usually squandered, but compared to some other states that the foreclosure process can move exceptionally quick, Florida does provide us with more time to work with. So we're 100% judicial. Now, we're going to talk primarily about mortgage default, right? Because mortgage default accounts for, if I had to take a guess, maybe 99% of the foreclosures out there. But more and more people are falling behind on their HOA or their condo payments, and associations can be ruthless and they will seek to foreclose on these individuals because of that. What about if you're delinquent on your property taxes? Can you be foreclosed on and lose the home? Absolutely. But for now, the main focus is going to be on mortgage default. Now, the timeline, as I said, varies from state to state. With Florida, let me just kind of walk you through it, okay? And please, what I need you to do as I cover this is to see if you can identify maybe what stage of the process that you're in. So it all begins with default. Now, the way I classify default is when you miss your first payment, okay, and you may be approaching that or you already way past that. But you know how we get this kind of like this 30-day grace period? Well, on day 31, you're now officially in default. It doesn't mean you're in foreclosure. It's really a pre-foreclosure window, right? And then what happens is the bank will reach out to you. They'll start to send you letters. They'll start to call you. And what typically happens is those calls and those letters go unanswered. And that only makes the situation worse because when the lender does not hear from the borrower, they just go ahead. At some point, they have no choice but to take it to the next level. If you're still in your home and the lender is reaching out to you, I encourage you, I implore you to get into a discussion with them. Let them know what you're going through right now. See what programs they may have in place to at least buy you more time. Now, back in the old days, say the great financial crisis, 2008 and so, foreclosures could have moved pretty quickly because there was no established parameters as far as how quickly could a lender or servicer begin the foreclosure process. Well, now based on federal law, they have to wait until the homeowner or the borrower is at least 120 days in default. Now, that applies to your traditional mortgages. It does not necessarily apply to private loans. I know a great many consumers, when they couldn't qualify for a traditional loan, went with hard money loans or private loans. And if those were put in the name of an LLC, a corporation, many of these consumer protection rights are not going to apply. So that's something you need to be aware of. Do you hold title in the property as an individual, or do you hold title in the property as a corporation? Now, the way it works in Florida is after the 120 days, and it doesn't have to be on 121 on day 122. At that point, when the lender is ready to proceed with foreclosure activity, they are going to send out a notice of default. Okay. And that is normally FedEx to you or is served. It's personally served. But that is when it's getting very, very serious because what they've done now is say, okay, guys, here's the situation. And in the notice of default, and it has to be clearly stated. And if it's not properly stated, it could actually be something that could be used counsel to maybe delay the process, but they have to clearly state what is the notice of default for. They need to give you the amount. They need to give you they need to give you what you can do to cure it and what by when it needs to be cured. Now, sadly, oftentimes some of those envelopes, those letters that never even get opened, you know. And what will happen is, after they say they give you 30 days to try to cure that issue. If that issue isn't cured or resolved, then it can go to the next notice. And that in Florida is called legal notice. Now, we are, again, judicial. So ours is called less pendants or lawsuit pending. And once the lender goes in and files a complaint to go ahead and initiate, foreclosure action against an individual, the end result is going to be a less pendants or notice of lawsuit, which is going to be personally served. Now, once someone is served, please, please, please write this down. This is critical. If you already have been served, I hope it hasn't been already past 20 calendar days. Because in Florida, once you're served, the clock starts ticking and you have at least 20 days, calendar days, not business days, calendar days, to go ahead and respond. And if you at that point can go ahead and get an attorney to respond on your behalf, or you respond, but it has to be in writing. And it basically, you have to make a statement, a point as to why this process is not correct, what is going on. So here's what happens, okay? What happens is most of the time, this is ignored. The minute you don't respond in those 20 days, it's essentially telling the lender, listen, you're not going to argue anything. There's nothing incorrect. Everything is valid. Go ahead, do what you got to do. Sadly, as I've mentioned many of the times, when they reach out to someone like me for help, we're way past that. So if you have not been served, you have more time. Okay. If you've been served and you're within the 20 days, I encourage you to seek out legal assistance so that you can respond properly. That means going down to the courthouse and getting that response filed so that it was done. Once that's filed, then they need to address what issues you are raised in that response letter. And it usually can buy you more time. Let's say you don't respond. What's the next step? The next step is what is called the summary judgment hearing. And that is when the lender requests from the judge. Because in Florida, all these foreclosures, they're done not by a jury trial. They're done by judge. Okay, you go before the judge. And they want to go before the judge to say, look, we have this motion, we have this claim, we'd like you to act on it. And to act on it means to go ahead and schedule an actual foreclosure or sales date. What I always try to do in teaching my agents is, if your customer has not yet, gone to the summary judgment or the date's coming up, please ensure that they go. Because by not showing up at all, what's going to happen is they're going to go ahead and schedule the sale date. Okay. And if you show up and if you had responded and there's issues there, the judge may go ahead and say, you know what, we're going to need to do a trial. It'll be by judge, not by jury, a trial to address these issues. Now, if you show up there and your goal is to exit from the property, okay, you know that you can never, ever stay and you're trying to sell the property, whether it's an equity sale or a short sale, that is a great time to go before the judge with proof that you're doing what you can to exit the property. And that I can never say never, and I can never say always, potentially buy you more time. What I'm doing here is describing this in a very, very non-legal sense. As I mentioned, I'm not an attorney. You could have attorneys explain this down the street. I'm giving you kind of like a broad overview, primarily so that you can maybe determine or ascertain where you are in the process, right? Now, from there, it's scheduled for the sale date. And this is game over day. If between then and the time the property goes up for auction, you're not able to sell the property, close on it, work out something with the bank so that you can stay, or get that sale date pushed back, then at that point, they're going to go ahead and either sell it off to an investor, or the lender is going to take the property back. Now, Florida, unlike, say, Minnesota or Michigan, doesn't really have a redemption period. What tends to happen is after that sale date happens, there's a window of opportunity, maybe up to 10 days before the sheriff issues the certificate of title. And if there's some legal issues that can be brought to light, saying, "Hey, procedure weren't followed, this wasn't done," then at that point, through an attorney or if you're representing yourself, that it can be a motion can be filed to go before the judge, and maybe they can go ahead and put a stay on that foreclosure. It doesn't happen a lot. Oftentimes, when that happens, it's done. Maybe the homeowner has already left the property and is gone. One of the things I can tell you, one of the biggest mistakes that somebody can make in this whole process is one, as I've alluded to already, is not communicating with the lender. You have to communicate with the lender. Okay. The second thing is maybe not seeking legal advice to see if maybe, just maybe, you can get some foreclosure defense on your side to maybe buy yourself time. Okay. The other mistake is they leave the property too soon. I would never ever recommend that someone vacate the property. I mean, look, let's be real. You're not paying the mortgage on there now. Any place else you go, you're going to have to pay probably to live there, right? Unless you're staying with family or friends. Stay in that property until the very last moment because you never know what might happen. Okay. Now, if you were to Google foreclosure timeline, Florida foreclosure process, everything I just mentioned is going to come up. And if people try to say, Tony, well, how much time do you typically have? Well, if you go ahead and say, well, they have to wait 4 months before they can issue the notice of default. And then there's a notice of default, that's another month, that's 5 months. And then who knows when they're going to get around to the filing the less pendants. And then there's another 20 days that you have to respond to. Now you're in the 6 month phase. And then maybe it might be another 30 days or longer to get a summary judgment trial or hearing. See what I'm saying is Florida is very, very borrower friendly. Florida, it can take anywhere from 6 to 8 months. Now, it used to take years, but that process, that's not really the case anymore. Right now, from start to finish, it's it could be 6 months, it could be 8 months, it could be 10 months. It just depends on different situations. Okay, so I would always, if you are going to seek legal counsel, right? And if you're going to talk to an attorney, especially about this, I would recommend that you speak to a foreclosure defense attorney. I mean, not all attorneys specialize in real estate, and not all real estate attorneys necessarily specialize in foreclosure defense. So, foreclosure defense attorneys, this is what they do. They're constantly arguing, litigating on behalf of their customers or clients to go ahead and try to buy them more time. One of the things that I want to spend a few minutes on is to impress upon you that you really don't want to have a foreclosure on your record. All too often, folks feel like, I give up, I'm sick of this, let the bank take the house. That's a very natural reaction to the stress and everything. You just want it to end, right? Well, you think that it's over, it's really not over. There are significant consequences to having a foreclosure on your record. Let's go through these quickly. And you know what? This might motivate you to take action. Maybe this is something that no one's ever brought up before. And you were thinking that, you know what, you can just walk away and it's over. It's not. It's going to have a huge impact on your credit rating and credit history because a foreclosure can stay on your record for up to 7 years. 7 years. Now, a lot of times someone will file bankruptcy along with the foreclosure. The bankruptcy can stay on your record for up to 10 years. That's a long time. So, what does that mean? Let's think future, right? Let's think, what if you ever want to buy again in the future? And I think most people would want to buy again in the future, right? Well, having a foreclosure on your record means that you probably won't get a traditional loan for about 5 to 7 years. That's a long time to wait. Now, let's say you can avoid a foreclosure altogether. Well, then obviously you can buy sooner. Let's say you had no choice but to do a short sale because you're underwater in your property. More on that a little bit later. You may be able to get a loan in as little as 2 to 3 years. So I look at it like, you know what? I know that maybe the present looks really dark and grim and ugly right now, but you got to think beyond that. Decisions that you make now are going to have long lasting impact with you, right? And when you want to buy again, it's going to ask you on the, hey, have you ever had a foreclosure on your record? So you constantly have to disclose this information. And it can impact what you pay on a number of different things, everything from home insurance to car insurance. Okay. So that's one thing, right? Maybe this is enough. maybe this is enough for you to say, well, I didn't even think about that. I was thinking about now. I wasn't thinking about the impact going down the road. But wait, there's more. Do you know that you may never get the job you want because you have a foreclosure on your record? Did you know that you could be let go from the job that you're currently in because you have a foreclosure on your record? Yeah, there are companies that have that built in. Maybe you don't lose the job where you're at right now, but you're not able to get the job that you always wanted because they have a policy. They're not going to hire someone that has that on their record. Many people have security clearances now. They're in jobs, whether they be law enforcement, it could be military, it could be contractors, it could be anything else. But it's very possible that if you have a foreclosure on your record, that your security clearance can be nullified. Now think about that. On top of everything else that's going on, you know, you lose your security clearance, so you're not able to work, or at least not able to work in that field, right? That's devastating. One of the things I found is when I teach this, the vast majority of real estate agents don't even know that this is a situation. I can only imagine how many consumers are not aware that this is one of the consequences of foreclosure. Now, it actually can get worse because Florida is a deficiency state. What that means is in Florida, when a lender forecloses, they have the right to seek the recover what was lost, okay, expenses that were lost, especially if they were underwater on the property and the lender took a hit and took a loss on that. Well, you think you just handed the keys and you were able to walk away, and you come to find out that that's not the case. So keep in mind, if you have equity, especially, you don't want it to go through foreclosure because what will happen is a lot of that equity will go away through all of the expenses and fees that are associated with it. If you have no choice but to do a short sale because you're underwater, you owe more on the property than can be sold for. Typically, we're able to get the lender or lenders to waive the right to pursue a deficiency judgment. So let's go ahead and put in perspective. If you're able to sell the house and get all you can and pay off the lender completely, there's no way they can do a deficiency judgment. They were made whole. The deficiency judgment comes in when it's underwater and they're not able to recover what was owed on the property. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics here, but I want you to understand something. Okay, there are some of you that are listening to this call that have equity. Okay, a short sale is not going to apply to you, but there's some of you that it will. In fact, there may be more of you than you know because a lot of times somebody that's going through foreclosure, they don't really even know how much they owe. They think they have one mortgage, they end up having two because, remember during COVID, many people stopped making their payments because they were able to do what it was called forbearance. They were able to not make their payments for a year or 18 months. And all those payments were not forgiven. They were bundled up into kind of like a balloon loan. So they may not even show up, okay, on a lien search in those situations. Only by doing a payoff, calling and finding out the payoff. But sometimes people think that they have equity and they don't. They're actually underwater. Well, whenever a bank loses money in a transaction like this and they choose to forgive it, meaning that they waive the right to come after you, well, in our great country, forgiven debt is considered taxable income. So now, in addition to everything else you have going on, you're going to get a 1099 and you're going to owe taxes on that money that the bank forgave. So write this down, okay? You may qualify for some exemptions. It is imperative that you speak to a tax professional before you move forward any decision. Okay. I'm always a believer. It's not just a real estate professional that's engaged in this, it's legal, tax, all of this, because you want to make an informed decision going forward. Now, what I want to quickly do is to highlight what are some of the things that you can do to maybe potentially stay in the home. And I hope that if you haven't tried these, you do, And if you have, then you understand that you did everything you could to try to stay in the property. Reinstating a loan is simple, maybe not simple to do, but let me explain it this way. Let's say you fall behind 2 or 3 months because you lost your job. Okay. Many of us are living paycheck to paycheck. It happens, right? But you found another job. You're able to make the payments going forward. And maybe you had a backup savings account. Maybe a friend or family member is willing to loan you what you owe the bank. You call the bank and say, look, I can get caught up. How much do I owe you? And with fees and everything, it comes out to, I don't know, $6,000. Okay, you wire that money to them, done. You're current on your mortgage, everything is done. Okay. So I wish this would happen more. Sadly, most people, once they get past 3 to 4 months, which now you're in the serious delinquency category, very oftentimes they're not able to get caught up. Now, one way that folks could get caught up is same scenario, but let's say you didn't have anybody that could just front you the money to pay the bank to get caught up. Well, have you talked to the bank about maybe doing a forbearance? Forbearance can mean one of two things. Hey, can you take these $6,000 that I owe you? Okay, as in this example, and could I pay it over 24 months? So take my current mortgage payment, take what I owe you, divide it by 24, add it to that, and that'll be my new payment for the next 24 months. That may be a viable option. If you haven't asked, ask. Sometimes forbearance could mean, can you take these past due, if I can prove to you that I can make the payments going forward, can you take this amount? And maybe that amount is significantly higher. Maybe it's 20,000, 15, whatever. Can you take that and put it as a forbearance loan in the back that there's no interest, there's no payments made on it, but it's due and payable upon me selling the property? That may be an option. So if you haven't explored that, please look into that. This refinancing really only applies in one scenario because you know that once you miss your payments, no one's going to refinance your home, right? And you have to have actually equity. Well, I've heard anecdotally there are people that, their job gave them sufficient notice. That maybe, hey, you're going to lose your job in 3, 4, 6 months or whatever. And knowing that they might have difficulty getting reemployed, they went ahead and tapped the equity that they had in the property while they were still technically employed. Okay. So again, that's something that, only you can decide if that's right for you. It doesn't even come into play if you're already out of work and you can't prove that you can make the payments and or you're behind on your payments. Now, a loan modification is very different from the forbearance. Loan modification, in many cases, it can be wrapped up in a forbearance, but what typically happens is you go to the bank and you say, look, I can't make these payments. Can you help me by maybe giving me a longer loan period instead of 30 years, 40 years? Okay. Maybe these past due payments are added to the back of the loan in a form of a balloon payment. Typically, loan modifications do not reduce the principal. But what I want you to keep in mind is when you are attempting to get a loan modification, if you have to prove that you can make the payments going forward, you're going to explain what is it that caused you to miss the payments to begin with. But hey, if you want us to trust you again and allow you to go forward, prove to us that you can make these payments. Now, if you're not employed or if there's not enough income coming into the household, getting a modification can be very, very difficult. I'm saying you always, always try. At the very minimum, if the bank is going through that waterfall process, the process of at least seeing if you're eligible, it puts the foreclosure on hold because they cannot dual track. They can't be engaged in a modification conversation with you and at the same time take your house away. Okay, that's called dual tracking and it's against the law. So that may go ahead and work in your favor. Just keep in mind that you have to be able to qualify for the new payments, but at least attempt this. Now, bankruptcy, I never ever encourage anyone to file for bankruptcy that hasn't had a conversation with an attorney because there's always consequences to any decision that we make. Now, why did I put bankruptcy as a way of staying in your home, keeping your home? Well, because there's a caveat. Bankruptcy, when filed, puts an immediate stay of foreclosure so that the court cannot move forward. Okay, the lender cannot move forward. What it does, it buys you more time because what happens is when you file for bankruptcy and there's costs associated with it, I'm not the person to talk to about that. You know, it puts that stay of foreclosure. Now, what the lender is going to do is file a motion to waive the stay, but it takes time, right? It can buy you 30, 60, 90 more days. Oftentimes, this tactic is used as a last ditch effort to stop it. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But you don't get to file bankruptcy and just, keep the house. Okay. So either you're filing chapter 7, total liquidation, or maybe, just maybe, you may be among a select few that can actually qualify for chapter 13 and you're able to reorganize your debt and be able to stay. Again, speak to a bankruptcy attorney. Here's another option you can do. You can rent the property out. Now, why would you do this? Well, let's say you feel that you're in a position to be able to rent it out for as much more or close to what your mortgage payments are. And you can move in with mom and dad for a year. They're going to help you out and everything else. It can be tempting to do that, right? But just understand something. Things can go wrong with renters. What if they stop paying? They're notorious for doing that. Okay. Now you still have this action pending. In fact, it can actually create so many more potential legal problems because imagine this scenario, right? You're officially in foreclosure and you take a renter into your property and you're getting first, last, and security. And instead of using this money, okay, like it's supposed to, putting it in an account or maybe even using it to get caught up in your payments, you're still in foreclosure. These folks are under the impression that they signed a lease for a year and that, man, all they got to do is make their payments and they're going to be okay. And then a couple months later, there's a knock on the door and they're being served the papers that are intended for you. That can create major, major issues. There's repairs. Oh my gosh, air conditioning. You can't be without it one day here in Florida. That could cost you $10,000. I always teach my agents to say, if that person is adamant about renting that property and they're not going to get caught up on their mortgage and they're going to bring a renter into that scenario, don't represent them. Walk away. You're just asking for trouble. Okay. Now, let's say you're not able to, all of these didn't work. You have no choice but to leave. Let me frame it this way. You can exit with dignity, or you could be shown to the curb by the sheriff. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean, but that's what happens. That's what happens if the property is foreclosed on and you're still living there. They're going to come and they're going to kick you out. There's no dignity in that at all. So here's what I recommend. If you feel like you've exhausted all of the options available for staying in the home, then consider selling it. Now, something that's very different now than it was, because I was teaching this all the way back in 2009. Back in 2009 and 10, for every 10 foreclosures, 7 were underwater. That means that they owed more on the property than they could sell it for. The only way to sell that property was through a short sale. Now, at least for now, it's kind of like reverse. Many homeowners have equity in the property and it doesn't make sense. I'm going to be trying to be kind. I'm going to try to be, I don't want to be mean, but at the same time, folks, it makes no sense at all to let the bank take your house when you have equity. Because think about it. When they take that house, they're not going to hand you a check on the spot. You're going to have to basically submit for the surplus. All right. So it's a process that you have to go through to get your money after the foreclosure. And guess what? All these fees, attorney fees, and all these things are all going to eat away at that equity. You know what you could have done? You could have listed with a knowledgeable real estate professional, and they could have sold the property, traditional sale, and you walk out with as much cash as you can to help you start your life over again. Here's how I classify selling a property that's in foreclosure that has equity. I call it a regular sale with urgency because you still need to keep an eye on the calendar. You have to make sure that you don't run out of time. Now, here's another critical thing. Write this down. You have to get a lien search done, a title search done on your property, because you may have a loan there or liens that you're not aware of. Remember earlier I mentioned that some forbearance agreements don't even show up on a lien search. You also need to go ahead and call your servicer or get online with your servicer and get payoff. You need to know exactly what it is that you owe on that property so you don't have surprises. That happens all the time. You think you have X amount of equity. You're already spending that money thinking about how you're going to get your life started over again. Then they find some partial claim mortgage for $30,000 that you totally forgot about because you did a modification years ago and that partial claim mortgage was added on as another loan. That's heartbreaking. So make sure you always get a payoff, always get the lien search, and keep an eye on the clock. Okay. You may need to buy more time to get this sale done. More on that in a bit. Okay. Next, deed in lieu. This is not really popular. I can see where, well, it's popular because it's just not talked about, but you can physically go to the bank and say, maybe not physically, and say, here, take my keys back and deed in lieu. Here's the problem. The banks don't want a house. People think that, you know what? People say, well, banks, they're all trying to get these houses. No, man. You know, the lender, the servicer, they just want to get paid. You know, the foreclosure is really their last, result, uh, uh, option, And so if you go to them saying, hey, listen, take my house back, they're going to say, no, 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 we're not in the business of owning real estate. We want you to sell it. If you are able to do a deed in lieu, it may very well show up kind of like a foreclosure on your credit report. So be careful about that. You know, it's almost like a friendly foreclosure. If not properly drafted, the deed in lieu, you may still be responsible for monies and say if you're underwater. Okay. Just because they took the house back doesn't mean that they forgave the difference if you're underwater. That's important. If they did forgive the difference, you now may be liable for taxes on that money that was forgiven. If there's multiple mortgages on it, it probably won't even happen. So we don't see a lot of these. We don't see a lot of these. Okay. Now, bankruptcy. Okay. Again, it's used to stop the process. Okay. That is really what it's intended to do. You are not going to be able to stay in your home, but if you need to buy more time, and when you're working with a knowledgeable real estate professional, this may come up as an option, as a way of buying you enough time to do the sale. Okay. That's critical to know. Okay. But it just delays the process. Now, a short sale is, let me phrase it this way. The short sale should never even enter the equation if you have equity. So a good real estate professional is going to sit down with you, help you to determine exactly how much you owe on that property, and then do a comparative market analysis, a CMA, and says, well, I have good news. Based on what you owe and what I can sell it for, you're going to walk away with potentially this much money. Wow. But what if it's opposite? And we're going to see a lot more of these. A lot of times people thought that short sales went away. They didn't. Now we saw tremendous appreciation, home pricing. So all this equity was built in. But guess what? We're seeing that be something that's going away. I think we're going to see a lot of foreclosures of individuals that bought maybe in 2021, 2022, when they bought at the very top of the market and they put very little down. Let's say it was an FHA purchase and they only put 3.5% down. they really didn't have a lot of equity to begin with. And if they bought at the top of the market, well, we're seeing prices actually drop in many areas. And between that and the missed payments, they may be already in an underwater situation. Do not attempt to do a short sale with a real estate professional that doesn't know what they're doing. Short sales involve basically the following: listing the property, getting it under contract, packaging it all up to try to convince the lender that it's in their best interest to lose some money now versus more money later. In the hands of an agent that doesn't know what they're doing, it could be a major, major problem. And that's what I do with my certified distressed property expert, is constantly teaching agents exactly how to interact in this process. It's not meant to be get me out of my mortgage free card. And not everyone qualifies. See, let's talk about the um what you need from a qualification standpoint. But I do want to touch on one last thing on this slide, and that is strategic default. Strategic default really, really happened a lot back in the day. And that's when people could make the payment and chose not to. I don't think we're going to see so many of these, because what happens is, while people have equity, they're most of the time not going to just stop making their payments and let the bank take the house. We saw this when the market went down so much in 2008, 9. People were so underwater on their mortgage that maybe they owe 600,000 on a house that was now worth 300,000, and they could make the payments, but they said, I don't want to. I don't want to stay here. Okay, why would I want to do that? Just keep in mind that you can't just strategically default. This is an obligation, it's a legal binding obligation. And there could be legal ramifications to attempt to do that. I always caution my agents that if the customer is attempting a strategic default, to advise them to talk to an attorney and walk away from that situation. Now, let's say you are underwater, you owe more on the property than it's worth. You want to attempt a short sale. You're working with, I hope, a CDPE, someone that's qualified to help you. What does the bank look for? What are the areas, the qualifications to be considered an ideal candidate? So write that down, ideal candidate. Well, number one is there has to be a hardship. Now, a hardship is best described at what type of material change has happened or taken place from the time that you could afford the property to until now that you can't. In other words, there was a time when everything was okay, and then something caused it to change. And you have to produce proof, documentation of what happened, right? And it's usually one of the ones you see here, right? You lost your job, your hours got cut back, it's a divorce, a separation, you're sick, there's medical, all these different things. Okay. Sometimes the payment will adjust. You know, in 2008, 9, and 10, and all that, the main culprit behind the problem with mortgage payments was that many people had adjustable rate mortgages. And they went from maybe a $1,000 payment to a $2,000 payment overnight because the mortgage reset. And if people think, oh, we're not going to see those again. If we have foreclosure issues now, it's for other reasons. But, ARMs did not go away, and they started coming back. And we are already seeing people where their mortgage is adjusting and they can't handle the increase. But it's not just mortgages that go up. What about the fact that HOAs costing more, condo association, insurance is costing so much more, property taxes are costing so much more, cost of living. I've read that about 62% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So think about that. Just one missed paycheck can automatically throw everything off. And fewer than 40% of Americans have $1,000 sitting in an emergency savings account, liquid, for them to go ahead and use. So these are the very real situations that people are faced with. So here you are, your mortgage is fixed, everything is okay, and your insurance payment goes through the roof, pardon the pun. Your HOA is charging significantly more. All these other expenses are there, and your income can't keep up. So it's a whole new dynamic now. We're seeing people just not able to handle the fact that just their overhead in general has gone up. The third or the second thing that they look for is there a monthly income shortfall? And that means that can you show documentation that every month you have more money going out than is coming in? Think about it. If it was the other way around, then why are we even having this conversation? You could afford your payments. The typical person in this situation lost their job, too sick to work. There's not enough income. So you have all these expenses, all these bills, right? And then if you are working, you got pay stubs, or if you're not working, you don't have pay stubs, and you're able to say, look, there's no way I can afford this. Now, bank's not going to take your word for it, not going to take my word for it. When we sit down with a homeowner in this situation, we say, you have to be ready, willing, and able to be transparent and provide full disclosure. And if you're not willing to do that, I can't help you. I can't jeopardize my license, my time, my resources for someone that's not willing to fully comply with what the bank's requirements are. Last but not least is insolvency, which is just a fancy word for broke. Let me explain it this way. If you are going through this situation and you have a traditional savings account and you have $75,000 in a savings account, you had to tell the bank that. The bank's going to know this, right? And the bank's going to say, hold on a second, I don't understand. Why are you asking us to lose money when you have $75,000 in that savings account? You can just catch up on your payments, right? So the person that's considered an ideal candidate doesn't have very much, if any, funds at all there, right? This is something we have to discuss. So we have to find out. We can't aid and abet anybody that's going to try to hide that money from the bank. Now, what about 401ks and IRAs? Well, they can't seize it. The banks can't seize it because those are retirement funds. They can't seize it, but the bank can certainly factor that into their decision making. I'll give you the hypothetical, right? Let's say someone is 40 years old, has had a high paying job, already has $400,000 in an IRA, and they get into this situation and they're asking the bank to lose a bunch of money on the sale. And the bank says, well, hold on a second, you have $400,000 there. And you say, yeah, but that's my retirement money. I can't touch that. I go, well, yeah, you can't touch it. It's a penalty, but you can touch it. And by the way, you're only 40 years old. You get another 25 years of work or longer. You can make that up. That's just kind of an example of when I sit down with someone and say, look, I'm not the one that's going to decide this. The bank's going to review all this documentation. We hope that they will just not even bother with this or even factor it in. But what if they come back and say, I think these individuals have enough assets that they can contribute something, they can bring something to the table to help themselves out. Well, that's negotiable, hopefully. That's all part of what takes place during a short sale transaction when we're working with a professional negotiator that's battling the bank's negotiator to arrive at a mutual agreement. Okay. Now, let's say you come to me, and this happens all the time, or you come to the person that invited you or shared this video with you, and you had all this time to work with it. Maybe you put it to good use, or maybe you didn't. It's very common when someone finally takes action, and maybe the action was triggered because the agent reached out to you, or maybe you just finally said, I need to go get some help. It's very common for someone to reach out to us when they only have a few days, maybe only a few weeks before they lose the home. Right. They already have a sale date. You know what's sad? Oftentimes they don't even know they have a sale date. When I'm coaching agents on how to approach people, they say, Tony, where did I get the list of these individuals that are in trouble? They go, what's public record? Once the less pendants is filed, it's now public record. It's for everyone to find out. But you know what I tell the agents? I say, contact the ones that have a sale date first because they're almost out of time and they should really be done with any reason slash excuses. You know that many times when an agent approaches that homeowner and says, did you know that your house is going to be sold off in 3 weeks, that the homeowner doesn't even know, didn't even know. So think about that. So this is critical. So when we take on a customer in that scenario, depending upon how much time we have left, let's say it's only days or a couple weeks, that's not enough time to get the property listed, under contract, and closed, even in a traditional sale, much less in a short sale. So what typically happens is you need to get an extension. You need to get that date pushed back. Now, here's what you do. You either represent yourself, which I don't recommend, or you hire a foreclosure defense attorney to do this for you. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can hire an attorney. It's very common for someone to have hired an attorney in a retainer capacity. You're paying them $300 a month, $500 a month, and really all you're paying them for is to buy you as much time as possible. And you know what? At some point, they're going to run out of time and you're eventually going to have to leave the property anyway. Now, let's say you've never hired an attorney to do any of that, but your sale date is 2 weeks away or 2 days away. Well, you're going to have to hire an attorney now, or you should, and you're going to pay them a flat fee that's between you and the attorney to appear before the judge and attempt to get that sale date pushed back through an emergency hearing. Okay. So now there's no guarantee of success. If you've done extensions before, it probably minimizes your chances of getting another one. You can only go to the well so many times before the well is dry. I always encourage any attorney will probably do the same thing. It says at least have a purchase contract on the property. In other words, don't let me go in there unarmed. No, a listing agreement is typically not enough. If you're serious about buying more time and me pleading with the attorneys on the other side, with the judge buying more time, you have to demonstrate that you are doing something to, get out of the property. And normally what we recommend is you list it with a real estate professional. So now that real estate professional is going to try to get a contract almost immediately. Usually it's an investor that they know that can put a contract on the property. And now, armed with that contract, whatever foreclosure defense attorney you hired will do their best to try to get that date pushed back. Okay. Now, if they're not successful, the judge says, these people, oh, I know who these people are. They've been here before. No, I'm done. I'm not going to do this ever again. It's not necessarily game over because there's one card left to play. I am not giving legal advice here. I'm just telling you what's done. Remember what I mentioned, that bankruptcy is an all-purpose stop. And usually when there's nothing else that can be done and you are about to lose the home, there is a bankruptcy filing that can be done. And that is for you to speak to the foreclosure defense attorney. They may specialize in that area or not. They may not. They may know a bankruptcy attorney. You don't necessarily need a bankruptcy attorney to file the motion for bankruptcy or the petition. That's something you could do yourself. Again, I'm not giving legal advice, but you can take the paperwork, fill it out, pay the fee at the desk, and that puts the foreclosure on there. A good real estate professional, one that's properly trained, will be able to explain this. And if you need to talk to a professional, they already have a bankruptcy attorney on their in their team. Sometimes people will say, well, can I get it? Maybe I can't afford to have an attorney draft these papers. I'm in no position to do it, but maybe a paralegal can go ahead and prepare this paperwork for you, and you're only paying them a few $100s versus a few $1,000s. But that becomes the last card that can be played, and there are consequences to that. But if that can buy you another, I don't know, 30, 60, 90 or more days, now your real estate professional should have enough time to get that property listed, sold, or negotiated and get it closed. Okay. Now, if you are military, if you're active military, you have some rights and protection under the Service Member Civil Relief Act, FCRA. A lot of real estate agents don't even know to ask this question. But yes, there's protections that are provided to active military personnel. So again, speaking to your attorney, if you qualify, you may be able to get the foreclosure action halted for a while because of the fact that you are in an active capacity with the military. Okay. I know I hit you with a lot. Okay. I know this is pre-recorded. You're not able to ask questions and everything else. Maybe I left you with more questions than anything else. But what I want to do is go ahead and give you what I think you should do now with this information. Okay. Number one, take what I've given you and Find out what stage of the foreclosure process you're in. All right. Are you still in the first 120 days? You haven't missed enough payments that they haven't even sent you a notice of default yet. Okay, so yeah, I remember getting that notice of default. Yeah, I never did anything and they gave me 30 days. Well, have they already done the less pendants? Have you been served? If you haven't, that's good. You have more time. Don't squander that time. I know that we want to try to extend the process of staying in that home as long as possible. But at the end of the day, folks, if you wait too long, you just it ended up being too late. If the less pendants was served, did you respond in the 20 days? If you didn't, do you remember getting a letter for the summary judgment hearing? I remember getting something. Let me go see. And you open it up, and the hearing was 2 months ago. But chances are you probably have a sale date. If you don't know that, you can go ahead and look on the public records, look at the docket information, look it up under your name or address, and you can find out where you're at. Always, this is so critical. I hope, I pray that you don't have a sale date and that you weren't even aware that you had a sale date. So make sure. And if you do have an attorney, make sure that they're constantly updating you on this. Seek legal assistance, folks. A real estate agent can only do so much. The minute we start dispensing legal advice, we're crossing the line. All right. We're very, very careful about that. If you haven't talked to the lender, the servicer, it may not be too late. You know that back in the day, when all those foreclosures happened, about 50% of those foreclosures, the borrower, the homeowner, never even spoke to the lender, not once. Burying your head in the sand is not a plan of action. Okay. Now, if you're thinking that, I think Tony, what he said, yeah, maybe we're at the stage now where staying is not an option. We really do need to start looking at options for us to exit with dignity. Then it's never too soon to reach out to a knowledgeable real estate professional. Now, here's one of the things that I do. When I do a video like this and I make it available for other people to share, it's because I want them to be armed with this information to reach people that I may never have been able to reach. So I'm going to ask a favor of you all. Okay. If a real estate professional sent this link for you to view, if they cared enough or thought enough of you to go ahead and share this information with you and you deem it valuable, you owe it to them and to yourself to reach out to them first. Talk to them first and say, you know what? Thank you for sending me that video. I didn't know about a lot of things, but I want to talk to you. Okay. They are using this video as a way of an outreach to you. Okay. Now, let's say that you found out not through a real estate agent, you found out through marketing efforts that I did as a team leader. I have a Facebook page, I have social media. And you're like, no, I've never talked to a real estate agent. No real estate agent has ever approached me about this. Tony, you look like you kind of know what you're talking about. Will you speak to me? Can I go ahead and give you a call? Yeah, there's my number, 954-372-5998. And there's my email address. So what happens is this. I have a team. I have no issues whatsoever getting on an initial phone call with someone or even having you come into the office if you're in the area, or we can meet by Zoom and we'll have a consultation and I'll put all my cards on the table and I'm going to ask you to put all your cards on the table. And then I'm going to say, okay, here's what we can do. All right. I'm always going to be super honest with you. But I think I've been able to demonstrate that this is something that I know. I live and breathe. So let's go back. If you don't know anybody else, if one of my agents on my team didn't send you this, or another real estate agent didn't send you this, and you don't know anybody that knows what I know, then please, I would be honored. I would appreciate that you at least reach out to me so that we can determine if and how we can be a service to you. Anyway, I hope you found this information useful. I just want to, once again, you're not alone. It feels like it. As long as it's not a sale date that's already upon you, it may not be too late. Okay. And again, maybe it might be too late for you to stay in your home, but it may not be too late for you to avoid all of the negative consequences that come with a foreclosure. I hope this information has been valuable. If I could be of service to you in any way, shape, or form, please let me know. Thank you. And I do hope and pray for the very best for you. Bye bye.